Today we'll talk again about some of the adaptations that amphibians have to their that'll help them to be successful in their ecosystem. Just some basic stuff. So the word amphibian. Does anyone know if something is amphibious, like maybe if you are interested in the military at all, they have some amphibious vehicles? Know what that means? Did anyone ever go to New York City or Boston, or they usually used to have them in Albany and go on one of those duck tours?
Oh yeah. No.
What are those? Those are amphibious vehicles.
Water.
Yeah, at the end of the tour, they drive into the water and then they can float and they're like a boat. They are called amphibious because they can go both on land and in water. The word amphibian comes from two words, ampha and bios, Latin, I believe, which means double life. And so these are called that because, like we said, they can live in both water and on land. Yeah.
They don't get two chances in life.
No. So we sort of split up amphibians into three basic groups. Look at the bottom of your page. You have a picture of one from each group. So what do you think the names of those groups are? Sydney, what do you think? Give me one.
I have a question.
Oh, you have a question? What?
Is that the one in the middle? Is that a toad?
Yes, that's one of the groups, the toad.
Lizard?
No, not lizard. Everyone always says that. Fallon?
Reptiles?
No. Reptiles are a separate group from amphibians. Sydney?
Salamanders?
Salamanders, we're missing one. So we have toads, salamanders, Thomas?
Frogs.
And frogs. Good.
Yes.
Now frogs are generally very thin-skinned, moist. They have longer hind legs, whereas toads have drier skin. It's bumpy. They have shorter hind legs.
And salamanders.
And then salamanders and newts. Now, sometimes people will call them lizards because their body shape is kind of similar to lizards, but they're not lizards. They're amphibians. They have smooth skin, no scales.
One time I was up in my camp and I was raking leaves, and when I struck the leaves, something flew out and it was a little toad.
Oh, really?
Right under the-
Yeah, we go camping every summer, and one of the things you always find little toads
Yeah,
in
I
the
like
woods and
little-
stuff. And,
I saw one that was like this
I mean, they can be little, they can be really big, they can be really, really small. Sometimes you find the little mini-sized ones, and sometimes they're bigger ones. Also, for salamanders and newts, you'll find them pretty frequently around here in streams and in sort of moist areas in the woods. A lot of times what you'll see are, if you ever found a salamander and they have a light brown salamander with orange spots on it, little dots. Yeah, that's usually, I think those are the eastern newt is the species it is. And they're very common around here. Karen?
Me and my brother were up at one falls and we were walking the falls and there was orange newt on the balcony thing. And my brother grabbed it and then we were about to leave. And then the park ranger stopped us and took it from my brother. And he started crying and he forced my dad to go back and get it.
Oh, really?
And we kept it for 5 years.
Oh, really? You kept it for 5 years?
Yeah.
It stayed alive?
I got a story.
All right, hold on. So we have, what is that? Which one? That's a frog. What kind of frog is that? It's a poison dart frog. How do you know that? It's color. Like we've talked about, poisonous animals, it's usually beneficial for them to be brightly colored to advertise that they are poisonous, because it's not very helpful if you're poisonous and an animal that eats you, then it dies because you're already eaten. It's more beneficial, it's a better adaptation if you can advertise the fact that you're poisonous so animals know not to eat you in the first place. Matthew?
Is it poisonous just on the inside?
No, I think it's skin. It has glands in its skin that secrete poison. Yes, yep. And why is it called poison dart frog?
Dark is dark.
Dart. Samantha?
Does it jump?
No? Anyone know?
Because it's in a dark shape.
shape?
Nope.
Wait, did you say
AJ? Shh. Nope.
Wait, did you say dark?
Oh,
Yeah,
oh, I know.
dark.
I know.
Yeah,
What?
Because its tongue is like.
Nope.
that's what I just said.
Nobody has heard this? Kara? No, it doesn't shoot out its poison. But it's
It's dark on the
people
inside.
use the poison from poison dart frogs on arrows to go hunting. They can make the arrows poisonous.
So they got it like in the name.
Unlike South America, they use it.
Wouldn't it have a name and then they like change the name and just start giving them poison on
No, it's just like it's traditional name by the native people in that region.
Can I
Spencer,
say my story?
what's your story? All right, go ahead.
Alright, so I used to belong.
Is this gonna be like is it related to amphibians?
Yes.
Is it quick?
Yes.
Go.
I used to belong to this country club, and you'd be able to catch frogs and stuff. And so I caught one, and then I made a home for them in the river. And then I came back, and all of them were gone, and all of this like stuff was on the ground, and I smelled it, and it turned out it was poop. It was really disgusting.
Wow, okay. Thanks for sharing, Spencer. Great. Okay.
Well, I didn't smell it.
Thanks for
You could, like,
sharing your
smell
poop
it.
story. All right, yes, Julia?
Dart frogs are only poisonous if they're in the wild because of what they eat.
Oh, really? So if they're kept in captivity, then they're no longer produce those poisons? That's like monarch butterflies too, are poisonous because they consume milkweed. That's interesting. I mean, they're poisonous for most animals to eat them. You don't generally eat them, do you? Good.
Yeah.
So you're okay.
I ate butterflies.
They don't bite. All right, hold on, just one at a time. Alexis. Yes, I think their poison is pretty strong at just touching it.
Oh my god, it would
So
kill
if
me.
I'm sitting
I don't know, it
there,
wouldn't kill you, but I think it.
if you like jump on me, like
All right, yes, Garrett.
That is all. Well, we have this party bark and in the shield where the driver, like where the person drives the boat, there was a butterfly got stuck inside it
Oh, yeah.
and died.
Oh, that's not me.
All right, I'll give you one more story. This is unrelated, but anyway, this brings up a thing. My parents one time were driving home from, I don't know where they went, somewhere up north in
Idaho.
the Adirondacks. But anyway, they're driving home and something flew into their car, hit their car. At first, they thought it was a deer. Cause it hit with a pretty good force. They thought it was a deer, but it wasn't. But it was actually an owl. And the owl actually got caught. It died, but then it got caught between the mirror of the car on the outside and the window, and so it was like lodged in there.
What the
And
heck?
its face was pointing towards my mom in the passenger seat, and so she said it was like a 2-hour ride, and this owl was stuck there, like looking at her, and she had to turn away, and she was like,
I got you.
yeah, it was like the front passenger side, there's just this dead owl with a cage
Was it in
staring
Idaho?
at
Oh, I got you.
Alright.
It's a funny one.
It flew into the car, it was its fault.
What goes through?
Alright, we're moving on. No, toads. Alright, so we have poison frogs. Toads are generally drier skin.
They're weird.
They're bumpy usually. PJ. Bumpier skin. They do not give you warts, although that's like an old wives' tale. If you hold a toad, you get warts. And then salamanders and newts. Yes, sometimes people will call them lizards. They're not lizards. Okay, they're amphibians, but they have the shape of sort of small lizards, so sometimes people get confused. Rachel? I don't know. It's over. All right. Amphibians' body temperature. What, Spencer? What?
What is the
No.
first thing that
No, we're
goes
not-
through
is this a joke? We're not
bug's
telling
head?
jokes. Sydney?
It's a bug's too.
What?
It's butt.
Spencer.
I was at this time and my friend dropped this fire.
Jeez, that's nasty. All right. Toad dropped in the fire. Amphibians are cold-blooded.
those are weird, I don't like that.
Their body temperature fluctuates. So right now, toads' body temperature is way down. They burrow in the winter in our area. They burrow down into the soil, into the mud. No, it's actually warmer. And that's where they spend the winter. Their body temperature drops way down. Their body slows down. We'll talk about their hibernation in a minute. It also, as you know, probably that frogs go through this process of metamorphosis. Again, we talked about it with insects. Metamorphosis is an overall change in the body structure of the organism. Now in frogs, is it a complete metamorphosis or incomplete?
Yeah.
Complete.
It's complete. They go through, distinctly different body plans as they go from the egg
Except they don't like separate themselves.
to the adult stage. Sydney? No, I don't believe all those. I'm not sure. I don't believe toads, but I'm not sure. I have to check on that. All right, so frogs in metamorphosis start their life as eggs. When they hatch, what do we call them? Tadpoles. And tadpoles have gills that they use for getting oxygen from the water. So they look much like fish. They have a tail, they have no limbs. But as they grow and mature, they start to change. They start to grow hind legs first, then front legs. Their tails start to shrink. Their gills start to disappear, and they start to form lungs. And gradually, over time, the tail completely disappears, front and hind limbs form. They develop full lungs that they can use then to breathe on land until they move on to land and mature into adult frogs, which then can repeat the process over. Rachel?
I thought frogs could breathe underwater.
Some frogs can breathe underwater. We'll talk about how frogs get oxygen eventually, but some can. But they have lungs.
I see my joke.
No. Yes.
With the frog, does it have its lungs?
Yeah, it has lungs right now.
I'll tell you.
So it could be out on the land.
Yeah. As I said, when we talked about fish, each group that we go over, we'll talk about their circulatory system. And so what did fish have? How many chambers to their heart? Two.
The simplest.
Just an atrium and a ventricle. Amphibians have a more complex heart. They actually have a 3-chambered heart. You got a little picture there. And the 3 chambers are 2 atria, a left atrium and a right atrium, and then just 1 single ventricle on the bottom. And as we talk about circulation in these animals, what you have to realize is that blood needs to go sort of 2 different places. Blood needs to get to all the parts of the body to give oxygen to all the parts of the body. But then to be recharged and to sort of pick up new oxygen and get rid of carbon dioxide, it also has to go where?
To the brain.
No, where does it get new oxygen and get rid of its carbon dioxide?
Its lungs.
Yeah, it has to go to the lungs or the gills. And so, in order to help the blood that needs oxygen get to the lungs or gills, these different chambers of the heart help that to happen. So in amphibians, the right atrium receives blood that's coming back from all the different parts of the body. It's low in oxygen. And that goes into the ventricle. The left atrium of the heart, that receives the blood that's coming from the lungs or from the gills. It's rich in oxygen. And then that blood gets pumped out through the single ventricle to all the other places it needs to go. Their blood is not kept completely separate. In the amphibian's heart, there is some mixing of oxygenated and deoxygenated blood. As we move on, when we start to talk about birds and mammals, those 2 types of blood do not mix. But in amphibians, there is some mixing. It's not the most efficient way of getting oxygen to all the parts of the body. Right?
Why is it right?
Yeah, when we talk about parts of anything in anatomy, you always talk about it as if it's in somebody. So if that's my heart, it's in my body. It's my right side, so that's my right atrium. But when you look at it on paper, it's on the left side.
Is blood actually blue?
No. People say that's dark red or purple. Breathing. Amphibians can absorb oxygen through their skin. When we look at frogs, when we do our dissection in a month or so, when you look underneath their skin, they have a thin, very thin skin, and there's many, many blood vessels right underneath it. they can actually absorb oxygen directly from the water and from the air through their skin. And they can do that throughout their lifetime.
So we have to dissect a frog. I'm not here.
During the young stages of the tadpole stage, they breathe using gills. Gills are adapted to getting oxygen from the water.
Just to be honest, if you were to be an animal besides a human, what would you be?
I'd be a monkey.
You already are one.
And then lungs are present during the adult
Oh, you're
stage.
going too fast. Whoa, whoa, you're only on
And they are adapted for getting oxygen from the air.
What's the first bullet? I'm only on second.
So frogs have several organs that they can use for breathing.
Bless you 3 times. I mean, wow, now my too much weight. It's blood.
DJ, I want some pictures of the blanket right now.
Alright guys, shh.
How come with gills you can't breathe?
DJ and Spencer, I'm not gonna tell you again.
How come with gills you can't breathe on the land and you're still just taking in oxygen?
Usually because they're very, very fine and fragile, and they're sort of all sort of spread out, and the water supports them and keeps all the parts separate, so there's a large surface area. But once they're out of the water, they just sort of all collapse because there's nothing supporting them, and they can't take in oxygen.
So, like, when you were on that trip, because when the fish came up too fast, isn't that why? Was that thing?
Well, that was their swim bladder, separate from the gills.
Yeah.
Yeah, that was
It
just,
came out because did they come out too fast?
yes, and their swim bladder expanded. All right, last slide here for amphibians. Amphibians hibernate. Like we said today, outside, all the frogs and toads in our area, they're hibernating, okay, deep in the soil, in the mud, different areas. And because they're cold-blooded, when it's cold out, their body temperature drops down and their body slows down. Their heart only beats very, very slowly. They don't need much oxygen. They don't need much energy. They actually can live off of an organ that are called fat bodies.
What's deep? Oh,
So as amphibians have a lot of food available in the spring and the summer, all the extra energy they consume, they store inside of them in this organ called fat bodies. And then, when they're hibernating, they aren't eating anything, so then they take that energy out of those fat bodies, and that's what they use to sustain themselves as they hibernate.
so do they gain like a bunch of weight?
When they're hibernating,
Yeah.
No.
I mean, like, do they gain a bunch of weight?
yeah, they eat as much as possible when food's available to build up those fat bodies to hold them over through the winter. When you look at the frogs, you'll see them inside of the frog. These orange things here, these are fat bodies. And they're they're in the shape of bananas, and they're orangish yellow, and they're also scattered throughout the abdomen of the frog. You'll see these. If your frog had lots of food available, then it probably has a lot of fat bodies. If it didn't have as much food, or if it died during the winter, then it probably has fewer of those. That's the liver and the stomach and the small intestine.
When you dissect the water, are they already gonna be dead?
No, they're gonna be dead.
Oh,
It's not like E.T. E.T., you ever seen the movie E.T.?
That's such a
Rachel,
zombie.
oh my
Oh,
God.
yeah,
It's like classic, yeah.
Oh.
At the beginning, the kid, Elliot's in class, and they're gonna be dissecting frogs, and then he lets them all go.
Is there
Yeah.
All right, lastly, reproduction. Amphibians, like fish, have external fertilization, so female frogs lay eggs in the water, males fertilize them in the water. They don't lay as many eggs as fish, so some fish, again, can lay hundreds of thousands of eggs. Amphibians are in the hundreds. You know, a female frog may lay a couple hundred eggs at one time. Has anyone ever seen frog eggs? Sometimes you like are laying on a stream or something. What are they like?
Do they kind of like jelly?
Yeah, exactly. They're surrounded. They're in a jelly-like substance. That jelly-like substance keeps them all together in one area, allowing them to be fertilized, and keeps them all together as they grow and then eventually hatch. And this jelly tastes great on toast. So it looks like. So that clear stuff is the jelly. Each of those little black things is a little tiny tadpole that's yet to hatch, but eventually will.
It looks like a bunch of hand sanitizer.
That's not working.
Then you're not supposed to use that one. All right, any questions about amphibians?
So does the froggy monkey like stay with you with the baby?
Not usually, but there are, frogs have different types of reproduction. Sometimes, some frogs actually, they lay eggs which are fertilized, and then they put the eggs onto their back, and then their skin grows around it and surrounds it, so the eggs are inside of the skin on their back, and then when those eggs hatch, little tadpoles pop out of their skin and swim away.
You lying.
No, I'm serious.